from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi. Hello everyone, welcome. We've got a few regular faces, Mark here, Scott below, Arran over there, no over there. And as we've just found out before we started, our closest guest that's ever lived. No, that doesn't make sense. However I phrase it's going to sound like we've had some dead guests on. But we've got Ray from Custom Unlimited Designs here, who lives quite close to Arran, it sounds like. Grew up in the same place.
Great, look, I always feel very, very remote here down the southern part of Australia. So to have find out that a guest is only a bit over an hour away from me is kind of good for a change.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, mate, I'm in northwest Melbourne, so I'm about 45 minutes.
Oh, there we go, even closer.
Yeah, it's going to get even closer by the end of the call. I can feel it. Just before we get into it, properly introducing Ray, I will say I had a chat with Corey, who was on a few weeks ago, and what we've decided is, I'm not sure if Mark and Scott, you saw this in a message, but I think what we're trying to do is going forward on the last episode of every month, we do it so Corey can come on. So that means doing it at 6:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Is that what it's called? Yep. Which is 9:30 a.m. here, but I think it's the middle of the night for Mark and Scott. But it does potentially make it easier, I think, for some of the guests that we want to invite who are maybe from that part of the world. So it might open up a few things as well to make it easier for people. But it'd be great to get Corey on because Corey's been quite integral to all the Guitar Builders Collective things, which we are going to talk about a bit later as well. So if you're new here, there's information in the video description about the Guitar Builders Collective and links to all those things that were mentioned in the intro, as well as links to all of our stuff and anything that Ray's going to talk about as well. So Ray, the reason Ray's here today is I had a conversation with Brad from BB Guitars saying that he'd been in contact with you, Ray, about the work you're doing, the 3D printed guitars you're doing. And he thought it was just really impressive. And I went online to try and find out, and it looks like all your social media stuff's quite new. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit later on.
It is very new. And also just me doing the 3D printing guitars, I guess it's in itself is kind of new as well. So I
thought that might be a good way to start. I was just going to ask how you got into doing 3D printing and guitars, and were they linked, or did you have connections with either first building guitars or 3D printing? And then we can get on to looking at what you've done.
Okay, so I guess I've always been a musician as long as I can remember, and I think part of your ritual of that is, when you're a teenager or late teens, early 20s, you work in a guitar store. So working there, I very quickly got the hang of and basically became a guitar tech. I was able to not just doing restrings, but doing complete setups, rewiring, amplifier repairs. And I kind of got the bug, I guess you could say. While I was there, I made a few parts casters, and then it just sort of fizzled out for me. And I didn't even pick up a guitar for 10 years there for a while. But during that 10 years, I started to get into 3D printing, and it was just sort of coming about. Everybody was showing their 3D printer and the different things that they could make. And one of the things that I noticed was that people were printing junk, basically. It's the easiest way I can put it. I'm sure it wasn't junk to them, but they were printing figurines and toilet paper holders. And then eventually they're printing little tiny boats. And it was just like, I like the idea of 3D printing, but it needs to be something functional. And it just kind of fell into place at that point that, well, print a guitar. Why not? See what it can do. And at that point in time, there was very, very little information out there about 3D printing guitars. And in fact, we even mentioned it. The general response was, it's impossible. You can't do it. It's going to bend in half. It's going to fold and collapse. It's going to creep. It's going to do all sorts of things. But,
I mean, that's something I definitely want to talk about today, because we often talk about wood choices and people have very traditional ideas about what makes the right wood to use and why it's the right wood to use. And I can totally understand why people might fear a material they've never come across or used before.
For sure. But in my head also at the same time was a case of, you haven't really done this. So what do you need to, or what makes you able to say that it's impossible if you haven't actually done it? So I did it. So far, I think I'm on my 27th or 28th guitar body.
Wow.
Out of those, there was a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of bodies thrown away that were just unusable for different reasons, and a lot of that actually comes down to the fact that you can't make a mistake with designing a 3D printing guitar. It's everything must be exact and spot on and exactly where you want it before you hit print.
Yeah, right, because you can't just carve or sand a bit away in the way you might be able to a hand-built one.
No, when you consider the fact that like the body of the guitar on a 3D printing guitar is, depending upon who's making it, anywhere between 1.5 to 3 millimeters thick, and that's just the sidewall of the piece. So that's all the room you've got to play with. And if you start taking, even a few mics away from that thickness, well, then you start eating into the structural integrity of the guitar. Even things like putting a simple screw into the body, like your strap end pin or your bridge screws. For me, I can't decide where they're going to go later. They have to go in, and they go into my design straight away, because otherwise, if I try to put them in afterwards, then the whole screw is hanging on by, in my instance, I print with a 2.4 millimeter wall. That's all the material I've got. After that, I'm hitting a void.
On that note, Ray, I have a question.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about like the early days of Leo Fender, and he was like, what's the cheapest wood that can hold a fret? What's the cheapest wood that can hold a screw? And so I'm like thinking, can 3D printed material hold a screw?
Well, yes and no. So anything, it's very rare to actually make something that's 3D printed and have it 100% solid. It's essentially, it has infill. So you print your walls, and that gives you a thickness, and then the internal volume inside that part is, we measure it by percentage. How much plastic is put inside that in an infill network to keep strength. So once you go through that wall, then no, it won't hold, because again, you're only holding on by 2.4 millimeters. However, if you turn around and put that screw hole into your design, then when the printer prints that, it'll make a hole that has 2.4 millimeters all the way down through the hole. and then that's got its own support network coming out of it to hang on to the sides. So at that point, 100%, it'll hold on to anything. I mean, if it helps, you can see on the end there is a 3D printed base. Everything's held in place by screws. So just give you a quick thing. All the bridge screws, everything. Yes, that is my bridge earthwire because, yes, I forgot to put it into the design. I know I'm not the first.
So you've actually kind of answered a question there that Owen put in the chat, that yours are totally 3D printed. They're not infilled with wood or anything like that. It's all and also there's someone called John Hearn in the chat who, welcome John. I'm not sure I've seen you here before, but it looks like John also builds bodies with filaments. So it'd be good to, John and anyone else that's watching, if you've got questions like that and like Mark's had, please put them in the chat so we can ask Ray. So it's fully 3D printed. You said you did quite a few bodies before you got it right. Out of interest, because I just shared some of your pictures from Instagram, and obviously you've got those guitars behind you that, as you said, they don't really look like they're 3D printed because of the intricate designs on them. When you first started, were you using the same sort of machine you're using now, or did it start with? Was it technology? Basically?
I actually was. So the machine that I use, you can see in the corner there, is called a Bamboo Labs printer. Now, when that printer came out, it kind of rocked the 3D printing world in that it was pretty affordable. It was about, for me here in Australia, it was about $2,500 AU. Which, look, it's a lot, but look at what I made, so it was negligible at that point. But the biggest thing behind this printer is that it was printing 5 times faster than just about every other printer on the market. Plus, on top of that, it was reliable. You could print 5 times faster, and your rate of failed prints, plummeted. Some of the older printers, which I don't know if you can see, I've got stacked up on top there. There's 2 there. If I was to attempt to print a guitar on one of those, it could do it, but the body would probably take me 1.5 to 2 weeks to print. On the flip side of that machine there, 2 days, 2.5 days sometimes. I've even got some designs that based off like the Randy Rhodes V, 18 hours and it's done. So the machine hasn't changed that I've used, that I use. However, what has changed a lot is my design method, the way I do it. You pointed out that like a lot of my guitars, they don't look like they're 3D printed, and that was kind of the aim. It wasn't to try and trick anyone. It was just, I don't want the feature of my guitar to be, hey, look how cool this is, it's 3D printed. I just want it to be, hey, look how cool this guitar is, regardless of what it's made from. So yeah, I had to step away from the typical designs, which, if you were to Google a 3D printed guitar right now, you will see a lot of honeycomb. Yeah. You'll see a guitar shape and it's got a big honeycomb right through it. And cool, that's fine. My early designs had the same thing going on. But you can't put a cool design on top of a hole, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, because I assume that a lot of these, like here, I've just done exactly what you said, 3D printed. I assume a lot of these are printed like that, partly to show off that they're made with a 3D printer, but also I assume partly because it's easier to design something that is printed like that and has strength. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, one of the things I found was that so people tell me that, they do it because it's lighter with the honeycomb. It's faster with the honeycomb, and it uses less filament. Now, in my head, the way I look at it is I don't want a guitar that's as light as possible. I don't want to constantly be, trying to pick up the neck or the headstock off the ground because it keeps, doing a neck dive on me. So it needs to have some weight. Secondly, I don't really mind how long it takes to print. If it takes 2 days, 3 days, even if it did take a week, I'm not printing this as a toy or something I'm going to throw away. I'm going to keep it for years, in theory, hopefully. So take your time to do it right, do it properly. And if that means taking extra time, then go for it. And in regards to using less filament, again, it's that whole thing of it's not a toy. So if you spend an extra $10, $15 in material over the cost of the entire guitar, being, well, depending upon what sort of quality you use, like I've got guitars here that are using Seymour Duncans and EMGs. I don't care about $15 worth of plastic. It's
Filament's not that expensive.
Point. Yeah. However, the interesting part was that I decided to compare one of my designs, not one of my, I'm getting confused with the screen here. So not one of these guys with a veneer on top, but one that's basically solid pieces glued together versus the honeycomb. And the amount of plastic that was used was actually pretty much the same. And as for time, mine was actually about 20% quicker.
Right.
I was wondering about the tops.
The tops?
Because clearly you got to print it in pieces, and with the puzzle, it's easy to see how that happened. But with the other ones, I was a little curious.
So that guy was the very first one. I like to think of myself as a luthier, so I call it a veneer. But at the end of the day, it's a puzzle.
Ah, right.
Okay.
I do it exactly the same way, although you can see, up here there's like one much larger piece. But the rest is, it's I use the puzzle piece design for just about everything.
Okay.
A few reasons that I do that. The ability to, for the pieces to lock into each other. Mm-hmm. That way, with any stresses or forces on the guitar, they're not just two planes stuck together. We've got, for instance, if a part is 120 mil wide, the mating surface of a flat surface is going to be 120 mil wide. But the moment you put that dirty great big curve in there, it goes out to about 200 mil of mating surface. So with the adhesives in there, that's a lot more surface area. And plus it's on multiple axes. So again, we're distributing the load across everything.
Yeah, that's cool.
So pretty much none of my actual designs use, they use a flat surface, but it won't be completely flat.
Sure.
And I can see, so I'm just sharing your Instagram page with your the guitar you just showed us with your first flat surface one. And can you explain a bit about how that's done? It's like it's also obviously done in sections because you can't print a whole surface in one go. But is that just done on a machine that has the ability to put through 3 different colors at once? Or are you having to stop and change colors when you're doing it or piece it together in a certain way?
So you could do it like that, but as that meme goes, ain't nobody got time for that. So it most certainly is a machine that handles 4 different colors.
Right.
So you can see there I've got white, black, a light grey and a dark grey. if you can see so we've got the printer on the left over here, and then just beside that is what they call the AMS, or basically the filament switcher. So when I drop a piece into the program that we call a slicer, it goes in not as one single piece. It goes in as some of those were like 30, 40 pieces, all in one part. And I just assigned a color to each and every part.
Right. I mean, so just to step back a bit, there might be some people here like me haven't really used 3D printing before, and a few weeks ago we had Ben from Battle Plan Harmonicas on, who showed us a bit about how he prints his harmonica holders, and that was for me like an intro into how 3D printing machines work. And what's really clear is when I think before really understanding that and before seeing your designs, I kind of assumed that it was almost impossible to get things that were so detailed and so pattern orientated as what you're doing on here. And I find it absolutely fascinating, but it's obviously very clear that this isn't something anyone can do with a 3D printer initially, at least with the designing. You've had a lot of, presumably a lot of iterations, a lot of tryouts to get all this in your head, or become very experienced with equipment.
Yeah, so look, I often feel with this 3D printer, I often feel like I'm cheating. So like some of my very early 3D printers, oh man. The very first one I had was called a Rep Darwin. And long story short, had to be the hot end was a bolt with a hole drilled through it that the filament came out of. The heating block was basically nichrome wire wrapped around that bolt. You didn't leave that printer alone. You didn't walk away from it. And then I sort of started moving into other printers that were mass produced, and you know what? They really weren't much different. they were still fire hazards, but at least they had safety switches that would turn off. I hope they said they did. So no, I'm not really sure there, but they were so unreliable. So I was forced to learn, so much about a 3D printer. I mean, essentially, I ended up, I work for a 3D printing company now. That's how much it forced me to learn. There was not much that I couldn't 3D print. The fact is, though, is those tops that I'm doing, they're actually not that difficult at the end of the day. The hardest part in there is the actual CAD design work. Designing it, making it on the computer screen first. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. What do you use for modeling? Just out of curiosity.
I am one of those good old Fusion 360 guys.
I for a year or two have had every intention of learning Fusion 360. Just haven't found the time to really. Yeah. Okay. My Fusion, or just in general, my CAD design skills before doing this. Oh man, I could draw a cube, and that would take me about 20 minutes. After about 20 minutes, I had a cube. I couldn't tell you if it was the right size that I was thinking it was, but I had a mouse wheel that I could scroll in and out to make it look like it was the right size. I know.
Sorry.
I work with some pretty dense people that, are really adept at CAD, and it blows my mind. I just never had any exposure, so I know nothing about, basic concepts and how to even get started. Yeah, but it annoys me sometimes to see some of the people that actually, have just been using CAD for years, and I wonder how they manage to brush their teeth in the morning. But but they can work CAD, and it bothers me that I can't yet.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So one of the guys I work with, he's very, very knowledgeable about CAD, Fusion, and I think he said Rhino. No, SolidWorks. I'm probably wrong about that one as well. But I will be trying to model a part in one of my guitars, like it might be the belly cut or something like that. And it'll take me hours to figure out what I'm doing. And even then I don't get it right. And I'll go to work the next day and I'm like, hey, how do I? 30 seconds later, it's just like, oh man, it's easy. It's like a path along axis. And, then they'll line down this way.
Yeah.
You're an asshole, man.
Well, something I'm worried about with that, because I don't know. But, if I got to dink around for a while to figure out how to get like a belly carve or something like that in a shape, I don't know if there are extra artifacts and junk in there that shouldn't be there. You know what I mean?
It doesn't matter, Scott. I take like the punk rock approach to it. So like the idea is you want to have all your CAD work constrained and dimensioned. Like the pros say you got to have a constrained dimension, and I throw all that out the window. I don't care about constraining my sketches. I don't care about dimensioning anything. All I do is I just punk rock it. Like you DIY it. You do whatever works to make that belly carve, that cut, whatever it takes. And in the end, it just works. It's all just math and geometry that works out in the end. And how you get to it makes no difference.
Okay.
Look, and there's all those constraints and construction lines and all that. And I don't use any of them. I don't know how. Look, if I did, maybe I'd use them, but I don't. It's a line that exists but doesn't exist, sort of thing on this screen. Yeah. I need a line that exists, so then I can extrude it or whatever. And sorry, guys, I know we're probably leaving some of you scratching your head with what we're talking about, but when we use it, we're scratching our head as well, if that helps.
Well, I'm sure it depends on what you're working with. People that are trying to cast an engine block. I mean, the tolerances need to be ridiculous, and it make all the sense in the world when you're designing the tool path for a CNC for a guitar body. It's probably
just rock and roll, man. Good enough for rock and roll.
Get the neck pocket, but
if it's going to be used for rock and roll, make it with rock and roll. I'm assuming that if you were mass producing something, or you were teaching someone how to use the design software, then there might be more reason to do it in a set way. But if you're just making it for yourself and you're not having to show anyone how you're doing it, then why does it really matter?
I can only think of one reason. Yeah, I can think of one reason why you want to do it right. And that is because for Fusion, and specifically, it's procedural. So if you do it right at the beginning, down the road, you can alter something or go back and alter something, and it cascades and everything procedurally just kind of corrects itself. And if you're not doing it right, then you kind of lose that feature. But again, when it comes to guitars, these are not precision instruments. You can kind of get away with pretty much anything.
It's an obscure reference, but I think about years ago in web development, there were times when you would do something in Word and save it as HTML, largely just as an experiment. But changing formatting and would alter the output of that dramatically, the amount of fluff and crap it would dump in there. So what little I've done playing with like Fusion 360 was you try to make this curve and blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't help but imagine the same type of scenario where, all this extra crap is in there. But with 3D printing, I wouldn't think it would make a huge difference because it's just going to print the shape, But I don't know.
Yeah, look, it's pretty much spot on there. It is just going to print the shape. And actually, like, going back to what you were just saying there, Mark, as well, that, it's a guitar, it's not a precision instrument. Well, it is and it isn't. So when you and there's something you guys wouldn't have experienced because you work with wood. I mean, you don't you know roughly where the bridge is going to go, but, you know, when you go to put that bridge in, you've got 2 strings down and you're holding the bridge down in place. Man, I need that bridge in place perfect the first time. Before I hit print, I've got to have that bridge location in exactly where it needs to be, to the millimeter. And I sent Brad a photo about a week ago. There was a guitar that I was building, and you know, I had it all assembled. I had the neck bolted on. Everything was looking great. Grabbed the roller, dropped it on across the bridge. 25 3/4 inches. I can't plug those holes and re-drill it. So I threw that body out and hit print again after I modified the file.
Yep.
But yeah, that's what happens. You know, if I get it wrong, then.
Hey Ray, have you like compensated for that type of error where maybe one of the puzzle pieces is where the bridge goes, so you could only have to reprint that one section? Or
oh yeah, and I even got smart. I learned to not glue everything together until I've checked it. Because otherwise, I'm right back at square one once again if I've glued it all together, which is actually what I did with that guitar. But yeah, as a general rule, I do try to locate, you know, things like the bridge or the neck pocket all in one design or one piece. So I don't get that.
So one thing that may be linked here is to do with the way you design it to print it, is the fact that I know that you sell your files so people can print at home. So right. I'll show you my screen in a minute with your share site. So, and Mark, you do this as well with the things you design. Do you think it matters then if you've designed something for someone to print at home? Does it need to be that they can look at the design and understand how it was constructed, or do they just get like the final thing that prints, as opposed to seeing all of the rock and roll and punk that went into getting that shape? Because I've not used that. I don't understand what you're going to get.
No, that's perfectly fine. So I don't sell my CAD file. Essentially, once you design an object and you've got a part to be printed out, you know, you have what's called a step file, or in my instance, an F3D file. But the software that actually handles that does not. The software that handles the printing doesn't understand that file. It works in what we call a 3MF file or a STL, basically. And those files are just a 3D object.
Right.
The work to create that is not contained within that file. So that's one of the ways that I sort of protect myself a little bit as well. In that, you know, if you got my CAD file, I'm giving away my trade secrets, I guess, on how I design things. Now, look, having said that, of course, you can always just, you know, buy the file, the STL file that you see here, take a look at it, and you work out pretty quickly exactly what I've done and how I've gotten it. But on the same hand, you know, you can give me a picture of a guitar, and this actually just happened just the other day. Someone had a couple of sketchings of a guitar body that they wanted. What I now have the ability to do with all the work that I've done is in 45 minutes from taking those, you know, literal pencil drawings, I had a 3D body on the screen. Was it a workable guitar? No, not at that point. But, you know, it was very simple to then come along and drop another template that has like a Stratocaster neck pocket, bridge location, and all of those things in place. And I then just, you know, carve those parts out. Yeah. So a very basic guitar, you know, hour and a half is how long it takes me to draw it. Whereas, you know, if you're just trying to look at my files and work out how I've done it, you're going to have a bad day.
Right. So it's not like someone's can buy a file from you and then manipulate it. They've got the file, or presumably you can drop a file that someone's bought into something and sort of backtrack it into CAD so they can change the shape a bit.
You can. It is very, very difficult and hard on the computer to. So, if you look at an STL file in a CAD program, what you see is you will see the shape, but then drawn across the top of it, you're just going to see hundreds and thousands of triangles.
Yeah.
It's what we call a mesh, and you can't really work with a mesh. It's hard to explain, but if, for instance, you wanted to put a new hole in it, like if you decided, you brought my file, I'm telling you to use a Stratocaster neck, 25.5-inch scale, and strat length, strat neck pocket shape, but you're going to use your Les Paul neck. You're going to have a hard time modifying everything and then getting it to drop a circle just in the exact location of where you want it. It's really tricky to explain. Mark, you might be able to do it better.
You're right on. Like if you give me like an STL file, I'll just see the mesh with hundreds of thousands of triangles, and it's like bogs the computer down. You can't really do a single thing. But if you give me a step file, that's a body. It's a solid body you can throw into Fusion, and you can put all your holes and cuts, whatever you want. But I see where your question was going, Daniel, about sort of like reverse engineering.
I think it was just quickly. It was specifically that your files are for people that want to print and make a guitar. But I was also wondering about someone that wants to learn to build and use the 3D printer. Sorry to interrupt, Mark. But
no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you have a step file, you can see the body of the guitar, but you can't see the timeline of how you got to that point. Like you don't see all the steps.
Yeah.
And even when I sell my Fusion files, I turn off the timeline. So I'll sell you the Fusion file, but you're not gonna see any of the steps it took for me to get there. But I do include the major sketches that you would need for various things like scale length and tool beds, etc.
Yeah, so there's been a few people that have come to me with a specific design that they're after, and they want me to basically make it into a guitar for them, whether it be just create a 3D model for 3D printing, or whether it be actually build the entire guitar for them. When that body is it's not a Strat or a Tele or a SG or anything, when it's a something I haven't seen before, I will at that point, when I'm done, I give them the entire Fusion file. Because as far as I'm concerned at that point, it's not my guitar. It's not my design. It's theirs. So they can have the entire thing. On the flip side of that, like as you saw, I sell the STLs. But on the same hand, some people will come and they'll want things just a little bit different, but based upon one of my designs. At which point I may give them a step file. So I may give them a 3D model, but that opens in CAD. It can be worked with in CAD, but everything that I've done to get it to that shape is not there. So I guess it's protecting my IP a little bit, I guess.
I would probably think as well, people who would be buying those files, might be just getting into it as well. So as a first step, if you want to 3D print your own guitar body, rather than go through the process of learning how to do it yourself and design it and make all those mistakes, as a starting point to buy that and go, all right, this is the file that I've got. This is how I'm going to run it and print it. 100%. And then once people have sort of done that a few times, I mean, that's, this is all a foreign world to me, which is, really interesting. But that's, that would be my approach, would be to get some of those, files like you've got, run a few of those, print them, see how it works, and then sort of go in and teach myself how to do the design work after that.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things you can look at with mine is that if you're a complete beginner to, maybe not a complete beginner to 3D printing, but a complete beginner to, you know, putting together a guitar, you don't want to buy mine. You don't want to build my files. There's easier guitars out there to build. For instance, there's one called the Prusacaster, which, Daniel, when you had the pictures up earlier, there was like the orange honeycomb guitar, the very first one. I have actually built a Prusacaster just because it's so like everyone's talking about it, so you're like, all right, I've just got to do this thing. Played like a wet noodle. It's the best way I can put it. But it was, the thing that I'll note about it is first off, it was free. You know, there was no, to get those files, there was no money involved. You just hit download and you had all the files. You also got a document that told you exactly how to put it together, what screws, what order to put the parts in, everything you need, including the guitar hardware. And basically the way they did that was go buy this Harley Benton Telecaster kit, throw the body away. You're going to use everything else. And the final thing in there was, yeah, just those complete instructions. If you've never put together a guitar before, that's awesome. That's exactly what you need. Now, with mine, I don't give you instructions. I don't tell you, I don't give you a link on which parts you need to buy for what. And there's a couple of reasons that I do that. I list down the specs of the guitar. So I'll list in there 25.5-inch scale, or, you know, 24 3/4, things like that. I might tell you that it uses a tune-o-matic wraparound, or two-post, or it's a string through. So you're gonna need 12 string ferrules, stuff like that. But you're gonna need to source those yourself. And one of the reasons, the other reasons for that is I don't want. I know that the first-time builder is going to see that lack of information. They're not going to have a clue what they need to buy or what they need to get. So they're going to shy away from it. They're going to go back to the Prusacaster. They're going to build that. And then they're going to get sick and tired of that. And they're going to start to do some research, and then they'll see, you know, some of my stuff out there. And they've already got experience at this point. So when they download it, they've got a bit of an idea on what parts they're going to need. And, you know, I say in all of the listings, if you have any questions, if you found a part and you're not sure if it's going to fit this, you know, this build, message me, and I'm more than happy to. And there's been a few times where, you know, some people have purchased the wrong neck or the wrong bridge or things like that, and they've messaged me, and I'm like, give me a few hours and I'll send you a file. Because, you know, they purchased the wrong neck. So I modify the file and I send them an updated version.
That's great.
But I don't want to have to deal with the headache of, you know, new users coming along and trying to tackle, you know, a guitar like these. It's not for them. And I mean, look, maybe it's a little bit of gatekeeperish, but on the same hand, I sell those files for like $5, $10 each. That's it. That's all I'm selling them for. Because I'm not selling them to, you know, potentially make a living from doing this or anything like that. No. I sell those files purely and simply to buy guitar parts. That's it. That's the whole entire reason I do it. If I didn't need to do that, I'd probably give the files away. But
no, I think there's some sense in having it set up so someone will know that it's not a beginner project, for example. Like, I was looking at I bought a couple of kits for making effects pedals, and they do rate on the website that I bought from the difficulty of it. And some of them say, if you haven't built one before, don't start with this one. It's not going to be ideal for you. It's going to put you off. So it makes sense to me to do that.
Yeah, it's like I say, Some people view it as a little bit of gatekeeping. I just view it as I'm not charging you a whole lot. Cut me some slack, you know. There's a lot of the guys out there. So there's one guy I know who out there who, you know, he sells his files for just a little bit more. However, you know, I think they're like $10 or 15. However, they're all Telecasters. And so what he does is basically he carves a new design or pattern into a Telecaster, prints the parts out, fills it with resin, and hey, presto, you've got a new guitar. And look, while that's cool, it's not for me. You just need to have something different out there, you know. I jump on Reddit. I know you guys don't understand Reddit. I was there last week listening to but you know, like I jump on Reddit, and if I type in 3D printed guitar, I see a new post probably once a week or, you know, every couple of weeks, and it's just like, hey, look at my Prusacaster. Like, yep, there's another one. And you know, look, yeah, I get a little tired of seeing Prusacasters, and the biggest reasoning is plays like a wet noodle. I know that at some point that they're going to get tired of that, and they're going to look for something more. They want a real guitar, basically. But they want to make it themselves. And well, not all of us have access to a shed with wood tools. Some of the people that I've met 3D printing guitars probably shouldn't be allowed near wood tools. Myself included. But I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, we're sitting here in my office at the moment, and everything that's needed to build a 3D printed guitar is right here in this room.
So Ray, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I guess the question's about the possibilities and your thoughts on 3D printing guitar necks,
I was waiting for that one.
and headstock veneers. Like, what's going on there?
Okay, I've done it. I have done it. I've done 3 necks now. Easiest way I can put it, I wouldn't do it again. The finished product, once you're done, awesome. You know, it's just like any other, you know, guitar neck. I've done them with, so, you know, like a plastic fretboard. I did make the mistake of one. I tried printing plastic frets. I will admit that was an experiment, and I wasn't expecting much. I did set my target a little high. I was expecting more than, you know, an hour of playtime from it, but hey, you know, won't do that again.
Right before you asked, I was thinking, what if you could, you know, print a neck in like pieces and set it up so that it would take a couple of carbon fiber rods, and my brain started, yeah.
So I'm looking at doing one more, and it's just it's more a case of can it be done, how, and what's the end product like, and basically, so I'm working on a design for one that does run a pair of carbon fiber rods and does have a truss rod, and will effectively have a wooden fingerboard on top. So from the front, it's going to look like any other guitar neck. From the back, it'll be plastic.
I was gonna say, when it comes to fretboards, I don't know how you would. Well, I do. I was gonna say I don't know how you would work with anything other than wood to hold a fret. Except I do know how you would do that would be glue, and that seems like a nightmare.
Just like you do with a wooden fretboard.
Yeah, but the thing is that fret wire, you know, hammers into that wood, which actually does move some, and so you would have to have a vaguely malleable type of material like wood to really, I mean, take it. Unless your slot was bigger, and like I said, you use epoxy or something, and
You can slide the slot.
One of the ways that I considered doing it was that I would basically wipe acetone over the slot. And depending upon the plastic used, then it's going to soften, but also, within a few minutes, the acetone is going to evaporate, leaving me with a solid piece once again, and the fret wire perfectly in place.
Crunch.
Cut out again.
I'm there. Sorry.
Right. Round two.
Sorry about that. What seems to happen is if someone drops out sometimes, then everyone drops out when they reconnect.
Mine dropped that earlier and it didn't affect anyone else. So I don't know what happened with that one.
It's Scott. Sorry, Ray, you were just explaining how you were thinking about putting frets in. Just before we do that, Mark, was it Parker that used to glue the frets on?
Ken Parker, no tang, just right on top of the phenolic fingerboard.
And I think early Fenders, was it Fender used to slide the slots in from the side as opposed to have them in?
Yeah, but Fender's no model for wonderfulness.
I guess you've got to potentially redesign how a fret works to get it to work.
Yeah, so look, another way that I did consider, and the name escapes me now, but we discussed them last week. The guys who during the 80s built the fretboard from aluminium, but it didn't actually have a fret wire. Every fret was an angle, and that created I guess the fret marker. That was another thing that I considered, but again, I'm coming back to the fact that the string is fretting out against plastic, and that just didn't work so well the first time I tried it.
Another option could be a fretless guitar. Like, there's a lot of fretless bass guitars. I don't know how well that would work on a electric for the fretless electrics that I've seen. I've never played one, but for experimental purposes.
Yeah, look, I mean, probably work quite well. I'm not going to try it. I mean, I swear that the T-shirt do you have, Daniel, mediocre guitarist? I swear that was made for me. So, fretless? No, not for me. I tried playing one with the scalloped frets before, and again, couldn't do that.
I've played a fretless bass before, but never a fretless electric, and that's a whole new world of pain. It looks like people trying to play those.
Yeah, I would think most people wouldn't want to, try one of those. So depending on the audience you're looking at, I would think that would shrink your audience quite a bit.
I appreciate you're not trying to set up a business that makes money out of a full-time business that makes money out of the 3D printing, but I would imagine for a lot of people the idea of printing off a body and buying a neck in is a lot less complicated than having to go through what it sounds like would be a very complicated process to print and then fret a guitar at home, a fret and neck at home. So if you are selling your files, then the bodies are much more appealing, maybe, because if you've got 3D printer, that's it. That's all you need. Whereas if you want to print a neck, you need the extra tools.
Really, I try to set. So not all of my guitar designs are available for sale, but essentially the ones that are available, I try to make them as easy as possible to assemble. Well, not so much that, but as it is require less components and less post-processing work to get them together. And funny enough, the most popular file that I've had so far has been the jigsaw bass. That one is put together. Look, you glue it together, but the reality is I don't have any tolerance between those parts. So I put that one together using a mallet and a block of wood to get those parts to lock in together. And quite simply, if you didn't use glue, I don't think it would really matter that much because I couldn't separate the parts afterwards. I had to, when I decided, right, everything fits, everything's good to go, let's rock and roll, let's glue this together, I had to use the hammer and mallet again to get everything out.
I've got to say, there's something that I like about the idea that even the ones that don't look like they're the jigsaws, behind it, there's the jigsaw. There's something that's cool about the idea that you've got a jigsaw guitar and you just put a new top on. Which gets me on to another thing, which I appreciate you're not looking for setting up a business and stuff. But one thing that really appealed to me when I was looking at your Instagram was the pick guards, for example. So the idea that if I had a 3D printer, I might not want to commit myself to a full guitar, but here you've got your pickguard designs. Yeah. I think it's just, again, it looks so different.
So the beauty of it, especially when you're using a printer like the one I have that does the multicolor, is that you can pretty much have your pickguard whatever the hell you want. So there's that one. There's that guy, which is essentially the Telecaster, but just using different colors. Excuse me while I go through bits and pieces here. I had them all nicely set up, ready.
Oh, sorry, I disrupted your order.
No, that's okay. So one of the guitars you had up earlier was like a Dean ML in camouflage, and the way that one was done was initially each jelly bean of color is a separate piece that's glued together. Yeah, that one.
Oh, right.
That's like 70 different pieces that's all glued together at that point. And that was fine, but then I worked out I can do it a lot easier just by doing the veneer.
Yes, right.
So, I can pretty much do whatever you want, and you can turn around and make those pick guards.
Oh, if I can see on this one, it's the veneer, because you can see the... Now I know what I'm looking for. I can see the joins.
Yeah.
Where the veneer is. It's very clever.
Yep. And the guitar I've been working on recently, instead of just going with the straight up pattern, I wanted to do basically pictures. There it is. So still yet to be assembled and glued, but as you can see, I mean, essentially the guitar has a tramp stamp. So yeah, in this light you can see the joins, but believe me, you don't actually see them that easily when a light's not shining directly on it. Now, probably the other thing you'll notice on this guy is it's a thin line. That F hole is not painted on.
Yeah.
She's actually hollowed, it's chambered, and will it work? We'll find out. Ask me next week.
I mean, I think they're so smart.
Hey, Ray, can you talk a little bit about the finish or the texture of the guitars?
I was going to ask.
I got all your questions, Scott. Don't worry.
I get a lot of questions about the finish, because it's perfect and it's got just that little bit of texture on it. Some people say it looks like grip tape or sandpaper, but it isn't. I print all of my pieces upside down on the bed, so the print surface of the printer has a material on it that's sprayed on called PEI, and it's a grainy texture, and that's what it leaves behind on a printed part. So there's one of the things that I was sort of doing, like I said earlier, like I didn't want the guitars to look like they're 3D printed. I wanted people to be impressed not by the 3D printed guitar, but impressed by the guitar. On the same hand, there are certain things that come from a 3D printed guitar that you got to deal with. So I thought, well, you know, take the flaw, take the problem, and make it a feature. So the finished surface from a printed product is not brilliant. So if you can see it there, you can see that technically is the top of a printed part, and it's not the greatest. If you're printing in thick layers, then, you know, it becomes even more noticeable that, you know, it's just not nice. And also it needs sanding, it needs work. And I didn't want to do that. So I thought, well, I've got all these parts. I've got these guitars that have a terrible, you know, top surface on them. But hey, look how cool the back looks. So just flipped the file over and started printing. And then when I started doing the patterns and the multicolor, you know, again, I did it so that you know, it was on the top, and that texture, that rough surface that, you know, I showed you that I didn't like, was even more prevalent because there was, you know, so many different parts and color mixes and all that. I thought, all right, I'll flip it over and see what I get. So the very first one that I did, which is the Telecaster, all I saw on the printer was that. That's all I could see. The printer said it was done, and I'm like, all right, here's the moment of truth. Pulled it off the bed. I had that. And I tell you what, you know, I've done 6 or 7 bodies, you know, with this sort of veneer on it now. Every time I pull a part off of that bed, I'm just like, oh, damn, that's awesome. I love that. So
I'd break that trying to get it off a print bed.
I've got to say, it does look very unlike what I expected a 3D finish to look like. That it's really interesting. I like it. It almost looks like I assumed you must have treated it somehow or coated it in something at the end. It's very clever.
Yeah, look, I put so much effort and work into creating that finish, mate. You would not believe I can't wait to train for that. But yeah, look, it really is. It's the bed surface. So there's that texture. You know, you can see it's all across there. Everything you print on there is, you know, well, everything that gets, you know, extruded onto it is basically liquid plastic. So it's just naturally going to fall and form that that texture. And you were mentioning that, you know, you never get that part off of the bed. It's easy. If you have not got a magnetic spring bed yet, just go buy one, man.
But even then, I mean, wide, something with a lot of surface area. I've had some trouble with that before, but
getting the part off of the bed and it's flexible.
Yeah. Bed adhesion is a double-edged sword. You know, I've recently had a lot of problems where it doesn't actually adhere everywhere and it'll ruin a whole print. But, you know, then you've also had some that are like welded on there for posterity. Yeah. When you talk about you know, people just printing trash, that's what I do.
Awesome.
My goal was, you know, learn Fusion 360 and do some interesting things, and I haven't gotten there yet. So, you know, it's download other people's crap and print stupid things. Impressed.
I mean, a buddy of mine, you know, when he first got a networked 3D printer, so it was, you know, cloud-based, and, you know, this was 8-9 years ago, I think, came around, and you know, she's like, look how cool it is. And he logged onto his printer through my PC, and, well, he didn't log out. So, you know, like accidentally logging, or, you know, not logging out of Facebook on a public thing. in the middle of the night, his printer started up. It just printed one object, and it was just a sign that said "Stop printing crap." I have no idea how I got there. Wasn't me.
I have become sentient.
Yeah.
Reminds me a little.
So I'm being a total novice here. No idea what I'm talking about. That's
exactly why you asked me to come here.
With the problem that Scott's having, is that potentially caused by the bed, by the material he's printing with, by not printing at the right settings, or is it just a bit of being unlucky?
It's a little bit of all of those. One of the reasons that bed adhesion is such a problem is because there are so many different things that cause it. So one of the most common materials people print with is a material called PLA. And the reason it's so common to print using PLA is because it's really easy. It's very easy to get it stuck onto the bed, and then when the print is finished, it just pops right off. Once the print starts to cool down, it starts to contract just a little bit, and you'll even hear it sitting there. You'll just hear little tiny cracks coming from it as it releases off of the bed. And some of the earlier PLA was a little bit finicky, not too bad, but things like printing too cold will, like if your bed is not heated up enough, you'll experience parts coming off. What's that?
Yeah, there are a million little variables. Yeah.
Printing too hot, and it'll come off. What will happen there is that as the model gets higher and higher and higher, it starts to lose heat throughout the entire body. So we've got parts that, or layers that will start to cool off faster than the top. And of course, plastic's just like anything else that, when it's hot, it expands, and when it cools, it contracts. So when it cools, it will pull itself right off the bed. And there you go. And then you have other materials that, like you're experiencing, where it literally welds itself to the bed. I think the most common one for that is a material called PETG. Now, I don't use PETG a lot. I think I have one roll of it here somewhere. And yeah, I don't like using it. It's just, it doesn't have any of the benefits that they tout for PETG are of no use to me.
Yeah, I haven't delved into other materials. PLA is the only thing I've ever messed with. But like I said, I'm always printing trash. I was curious. I started to ask earlier, what it was that you used to print bodies with.
Yeah. So I'm a glutton for punishment. I used some of the toughest materials to print with. Just, I don't know. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So the most common one I use is ABS. And ABS is known for just not sticking. It doesn't like to stick to the bed at all. You got to have the bed at a very high temperature. It's got to stay there. The printer needs to be enclosed. You don't want air blowing onto it, cooling it, because ABS has a lot more expansion and contraction than a lot of other plastics. It's also, it's filled with VOCs. So as you're printing it, it's off-gassing, harmful chemicals into the air. Yes, the printer is in my office. Thankfully, got a filter.
How does it react? Is there an easy solvent like acetone that will react with it? Because I've never looked into the other materials. I know PLA. I don't think anything really works as a solvent for it that I know.
PLA. Depends what you want it as a solvent for.
And it's
So,
but well, see, I know I had run across information or seen some with some materials that actually would react with like acetone or something. They could use it as a way to smooth surfaces, not just glue, but to actually smooth. Yeah, and PLA, nothing really works, and sanding really sucks. So I was curious, what you're using actually, it does react with the acetone a little bit, or how sanding works.
PLA, PLA does react to acetone, but not to the extent that ABS does. And it's basically to the extent of you just don't even bother using it. However, if you leave it in, soaking in acetone long enough, you are going to start to see some things happening. Predominantly, though, that's with what they refer to as PLA Plus, which is a blend and has some other stuff added to it. So it's basically got styrenes, which is what ABS is.
Gotcha.
That reacts more than the actual PLA does.
I just wondered if the material you were using, you could put some of that to use, or if you did. And like I said, I know sanding PLA is ridiculous.
You just don't.
Yeah, there's no point. So I was wondering, whatever you were working with, if sanding was an option in some cases.
Yes, I mean, look, like I said, I use a lot of ABS. I also use polycarbonate. That's both of those can be sanded. Mind you, when I was doing some polycarbonate and I had to sand the entire thing dead smooth, dead flat, it very, very quickly, within a minute or two, turned my 120 grit into about 1200 grit. Just magic. You just use it for wet and dry almost. But it actually, so while it tore up the paper, it actually sanded really, really well. Okay. It was kind of like a kick in the guts, but got the job done.
I'm a novice enough. PLA gives me enough trouble. I haven't branched into trying to figure out, the ins and outs of the temperatures and all the things that I would have to change to print something else. But that's good to know.
Look, if PLA is working for you, just keep using it.
Yeah, for printing garbage, it works really well.
It works great.
I like garbage.
So I have actually done, like a couple of guitars where the entire guitar is PLA, and there's a printer manufacturer out there. No, I don't grain fill them with epoxy. I have considered, so there's been some where I've got a bit of a texture across there, but I also want a really high gloss finish, where I have thought about doing like a 1 to 2 mil thick coat of epoxy resin on top. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But
that's what I was thinking when Mark asked about a finish, I was wondering anything, if you'd done any gloss, because I figured epoxy would probably be the way to go. Because I know, at least with PLA, I know it's a little porous. It doesn't look like, but it actually is. I was afraid with epoxy, a thick epoxy, maybe it wouldn't be an issue. I mean, it's going to sink in some, but maybe it wouldn't just.
Look, so I've seen like epoxy used on 3D print quite a bit, and it works really, really well. It really does. I think to me, it's just, if I see a high gloss single color or a high gloss, pattern guitar, to me, it's another wooden guitar with paint. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's not for me.
Yeah.
So, I like to stick with getting my effects from using different colors, different types of filament, You know, there's filament with sparkle in it, or there's glow in the dark filament. There's what we call silk filament, which has a really high gloss to it. So that's the way I like to get my finishes. But there was one guitar that I did attempt to Mick, clean your build plate. That's always the first and foremost everything you go to. If parts start lifting off the bed, make sure the bed is clean. It must be clean. And if it's a textured build plate like mine, dishwashing detergent. That's the best thing for it.
Then leveling. Then leveling. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I use a bamboo. I don't know what leveling is anymore.
So, a quick question. You said your texture comes from the plate itself. Could you just put a piece of textured metal there instead of the plate, and then you can alter the texture that you're getting?
Look, you could. It would take some experimentation, because once you drop another plate on top of there, you need to heat that plate up.
Yeah, right.
So, when we're talking about like 5 degrees difference can make all the difference between the part sticking and the part not sticking. When you transfer that heat through your second plate, your steel plate that you put on there, let's say you throw a checker plate on there. Well, the different texture heights of that checker plate are going to have different temperatures that they will sit at. So you've got to keep that one in mind. The other thing is the filament doesn't like to stick to just anything. It typically needs to be some form of like a PEI. A lot of people, we had steel beds once before, or they were aluminium, a flat sheet of aluminium, and basically to get anything to stick to it, we would lay down masking tape and print onto the masking tape directly. And then on top of that, if we're using something fancy, we'll turn around and grab the kid's glue stick and start smearing that across the bed. Then we're printing into the actual glue. So you could, I wouldn't want to do it. I don't think I have the patience to experiment around with it.
I'm not sure how you would produce.
Sorry?
I'm not sure how you would produce one.
No. However, Daniel, having looked through your website and looked at the guitars that you're building, I think you're the man with the patience to do it.
Thank you, but I potentially make it look like I've got patience. There's a lot of things I can't.
Stratocaster, it looks like you basically had a tantrum, broke it, and then shoved it back together the quickest way.
Yeah. No, I'm getting better at doing tasks that take a long time. If they're like I've been sanding a lot the last couple of weeks. I've just been watching. I binged Fallout on Amazon Prime, so there's ways to make my patience work better. Hey, listen, I don't want to just cut the conversation off because it's been really interesting, but and I'm sure if there's more questions that anyone's got, they can put them in the comments, and hopefully Ray will have a look at them. Sure, Ray will be back chatting to you at some point again. But what I wanted to talk about was just bringing the fact that this week the Jörg's Cup kind of came to an end for the first year. The 23rd would have been Jörg's birthday. And what I would like to do, and I've spoken to Corey about this, is I'm going to log into the Guitar Builders Collective Instagram account. Now, that's what Corey currently manages. And ask people to direct message to that account images of anything they've built as part of the Jörg's Cup. And honestly, it doesn't have to be finished, and there's no rush. We'll do it over the next few weeks. And once I get a series of those images coming through, direct messages coming through, hopefully with a little description about what the guitar is that you've built. I'll start sharing them on that page, so that if you're looking at the Guitar Builders Collective feed, you'll start seeing posts of different guitar builders with what they've built. It will have a link to their Instagram account and mention their YouTube channel if they've got that as well. And then basically it would just be see, mix is going to be finished next week. Hopefully mine will be finished tomorrow, but we'll see. But it will basically just be a chance for us to all put up and share what everyone's been doing, comment on each other's, follow new builders, etc. So just a way of building the community. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to try to do the last of these each month, these live streams each month at Australian time. So Corey will be back on in a month, and hopefully at that point one of the things we can do is just reflect back on how the Jurgs Cup went for the first year. Corey's working on chatting with some other people on what a theme could be for this coming year's competition. And again, I'm hoping that by sharing each other's images on the Guitar Builders Collective Instagram, it will be a way of just seeing what's been happening and inspiring people to take part. And as a lot of people said, they've only really found out about it recently, which is totally fair enough. If you don't mind me saying, Ray mentioned to us just beforehand that he'd found out about it and had built something. Did you want to share it now, or just share it on the...
Yeah, sure. Let's do it now. I mean, like, as you can tell, like I mentioned, I'm wearing a Fuck Cancer t-shirt. So I personally, I got involved with the GBC after you guys lost Jurg, so I know very little about the man. But I mean, everyone speaks very highly of him, and you've done a guitar build off, in his honor. So sounds like he was a pretty alright kind of guy. Last week, you guys, last week? Yeah, when Corey was on, you got involved in it a little bit more and discussed it a little bit more. So I ended up asking Brad, to give me a bit more information. Who was Jurgs? Turns out I was right in my suspicion. He was a pretty cool kind of guy. And then there was sort of like all the profit that's coming from the merchandise is being donated to the leukemia charities. Well, that, leukemia, the color for, blood cancers and stuff like that is orange. And the reason I owned this shirt is I've got leukemia. However, I am also in remission. So that's yay me. One of the ideas that I'd been toying with for a while was basically building a guitar to honor that, just acknowledge, leukemia and things like that. So yeah, it just got into my head that I needed to do this. I needed to do it now. And we have bingo. So that was built, I guess you could say it was for the Jurgs Cup, but it's not an entry. Once this is finished, we've kind of got no controls or anything like that, and so on and so forth. But basically, once it's done, I fully intend to box this thing up and take it to the post office. I'm going to send it to Corey. So he can do with it whatever it needs to help raise awareness for leukemia and what Jurgs has done. So whether it's a case of it gets raffled off, it gets shoved in a box underneath someone's bed, don't care. I told you guys, before we actually went live that, I had all the parts laid out and on the bench, and I just sort of looking at them, staring at them. And it just sort of, I realized at that point, and, even when my partner came over and asked me, what are you doing? Staring into space for 5 minutes. I needed to build that guitar for me. Sort of like I needed to acknowledge the path and the journey that I had been on, and the path and journey that she came on with me as well. So Yeah, it was a bittersweet build, that one. You know, it's a lot of reflection, especially when I started to think about, while Jurgs didn't succumb to his leukemia, the fact of the matter is that if he didn't have it, he probably wouldn't have been in the hospital in the first place for that to happen. Simple. Just simple as that. If he didn't have leukemia, he wouldn't have needed a bone marrow. And it just kind of made me realise that it could have been just as easy to been me. I'm the lucky one. I had it, I fought it. Technically, I still have it, but during a blood test, they can't find any traces of it, so they call it remission. But leukemia is one of those cancers that you never really get rid of it. It's all it takes is one cell, and that starts dividing, multiplying, and eventually one day, I know that my leukemia is going to come back. I just hope that it's by that time I'm like 90 odd and getting run over by a Mack truck instead.
Yeah.
But that's the sheer fact of it. It can come back. So whatever little thing I could do to help raise some awareness, there it is.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So the other thing that I'm going to be doing is you showed the Colts page earlier where you could buy the vials. You could print that guitar in any color that you wanted, to represent any cancer that is affecting yourself or your family. Pink, white, green, blue, doesn't matter. So while I sell all of my files, I will be listing that guitar file up on there for free. Just to spread awareness about any form of cancer that is touching people. Will it help much? Will it do much? Nah. But like the little girl walking along the beach, throwing the starfish back into the water. She can't save them all, but it helps one. So I'll do it.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know Jurgs that well, but one thing that's been interesting, and I recommend everyone does this, is on Instagram, if you do a search for I Am Jurgs or Jurgs Cup, you'll see the posts, and people that did know him well, their messages they've been putting up with their images, their final things, seem to be very thoughtful and cathartic. And it's really interesting, Ray, to hear that for someone that didn't know him, you've had that cathartic experience. This has meant something to you as well, doing this, and that is just fantastic.
Absolutely.
And it's great to hear in remission, of course.
Yeah, I was pretty happy to hear that news as well. One of the things that I noticed about like when I flipped through some of his older posts is it didn't seem to matter what skill level someone was at, or what they were trying to do, how weird, wacky, or just plain dumb what they were trying to do was, you would find a Jurgs post attached to it, and it was always giving advice and just generally being positive about it. Anyone who can do that, mate, they get my vote. So I made a guitar for him.
That's cool. I feel like putting up that file, like you said, for free for people to print off in any color is such an amazing idea. It's such a good thing. I hope people embrace it.
I hope so. Yeah. If by showing someone their cool new 3D printed guitar, they get to raise awareness about a particular type of cancer, job done.
It's the ribbon's the perfect shape as well, I reckon, for a 3D printed guitar. It's not something that you'd make out of wood, so it's it's almost meant to be.
It's got a hole in it. And that was, I think, the disappointing part for me was that I couldn't get the Telecaster lipstick pickup in there. So we're just going straight off the bridge. But Yeah. The shape actually lent itself really, really well.
I love how the end of the fretboard just finishes on the inside of the ribbon as well at the top. That looks really good.
There wasn't a lot of room, man. There was not a lot of room on there. Yeah,
it looks right. Yeah.
It's just right there.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
So, and in case you're wondering, yes, jigsaw.
Yeah, of course.
Tone plastic.
This one's much easier. There's only like 6 pieces to it, so the side of the box will only say like 3 to 6 years plus.
Cool.
Interesting.
So, well, look, with our potential new end of the month Australian time, Ray, hopefully we'll get you back on an Australian time session.
Yeah, look, I mean, so you're looking at doing it 6:30 p.m. our time.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'd be more than happy to come back on.
Cool. And I want to get, so for those of you that either didn't pick up at the beginning or don't know, Ray was recommended that we approached him and spoke to him and found out about his work from Brad from BB Guitars, who is also very much involved with Guitar Builders Collective. If you're on the Facebook group, you will have seen him on there a lot. I think it was him that set it up initially, the Facebook group, but he's definitely a very active member there. So we'll try and get him.
What we're talking about, Brad. Brad, when you're ready, I got your pickup rings ready. And that was actually one of the things that Brad contacted me about. So the way I met Brad was, I was looking to spread the word about 3D printed guitars. And when I join guitar building groups, I'm very, very hesitant when I make my first post to say, they're 3D printed, they're plastic. Anyway, I found another one in Australia, like just for Australians, and Brad was there, and he basically asked, can you do custom pickup rings? And I'm like, come on, let's try something difficult here. Turns out 4 attempts later, I'm still going, but I got it right this time. Including learning of what the actual standard size of a humbucker is. It's I felt like my whole life was a lie because it was, I was thinking it was a little bit longer than that actually was. So we had a few hiccups there, but that's how Brad found me. And then he said, join this group, which was the GBC. And yeah, here we are.
Great. Well, on that note, we'll ask everyone to spread the word to everyone they know, or nice people they know who'll be interested in joining the Facebook group. Because as we've said before, I found the Facebook group is a really welcoming, friendly space, unlike some of the other Facebook guitar building groups.
Yeah.
Facebook tends to be pretty hot.
It's been really interesting joining some of the other groups, Facebook groups out there for guitars, like guitar building.
Some of them are really cork sniffer-ish. They're
oh yeah.
I bet they don't like their plastic ones.
No. Although I think I mentioned to you in an email once, the group that seems to not like 3D printed guitars the most is the 3D printing groups. They've got all those armchair engineers have so much to say about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it wrong. And then it's like, come on, man, I've made over 20 of these things. I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. But the guitar builders who, like, you guys are basically, you are working a craft and an art form that is based upon centuries of traditions and styles and building techniques. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Here I come along and go, hey, I can build a guitar in a quarter of the time you can. But it's plastic. I was expecting a lot of pushback. And you know what? It hasn't happened. The 3D printing community, they push back. They push back and go, you can't do it out of plastic. You have no idea how a guitar works. Oh, I've got a bit of an idea. But the guitar builders, yeah. And I've had 2 negative comments from the guitar world. And look, one of them I don't even consider a negative comment. It was basically, I don't like it. It's not for me. And whenever I get a negative comment about them, especially like in the 3D printing world, my first question is okay, cool. Why? What is it about this guitar or design that you don't like? And I'm not trying to start an argument or anything like that. It's, to me, it's just like, someone doesn't like what I'm doing. I want to know why. What can I do to improve it? And so I asked this, this person, just like, and they were actually an acoustic guitar builder. And his response was, and it was to this Strat. Told me the design was too busy and too colourful. I'm like, so
Okay, there you go.
the fact that it's 3D printed, no, don't give a crap. That's fine. All right, fair enough. The other negative comment that I received was
Tim Hollis.
So
there's a guy who this guy Scott just mentioned likes to go around telling everyone what they're doing wrong. So
and largely in the circles of GGBO, there's only been like one person with shitty comments, and it's that guy. It's that one dude.
So was your other negative comment actually about the fact it was 3D printed?
Yes. Ironically, so the group that I was actually in was a guitar kit builders group. I'm just going to leave that one. Like, is they posted it up, and everyone was pretty happy with it, except one guy who was just like, the soulless piece of plastic crap. Like, oh man, I just looked through your post history and you just built a Stratocaster from a kit using basswood. I'm not sure that you're in a position to make negative comments about the way I designed and manufactured this guitar.
That surprises me. I would
be the gatekeeper, but
that's surprising. I would think that the kit people would be the last place that would have a problem with it. I figure there are a lot of people that balk at the idea of using a CNC. So, I would think those people would obviously have a huge problem with 3D printing. A kit,
yeah,
I would think that would be celebrated in kit land.
Like, to me, like the kit guitar builders, and look, don't get me wrong, I don't think I'm above or below, a guitar kit builder. Like, I've seen some of the finishes those guys do on their guitars, but at the end of the day, like, I start, you guys, start a guitar build with, a piece of timber. I started with a roll of plastic, and then I, create a full guitar body. I don't open a box and pull out a ready-made body that needs to be sanded and finished. So I was just a little bit miffed at, because essentially those guys who do build their kits, they probably, think that, one day I'd like to be able to have the tools and the ability to build a guitar from a hunk of wood. But, they're just not at that point yet. And it takes a while to get there. I'm kind of like the halfway option. You give yourself whatever design, shape, whatever you want, and then build it. It's going to be there. So just, to be told by this guy that it is a soulless hunk of plastic crap. Well, that was interesting.
It's sad that things stick with you, that people say, but at the end of the day, I think you're right, Ray. If you can, we can all just picture that even if what you make isn't what you expect it to be and isn't as good as you think you can be, and you can't be put off by the fact that you started with a roll of plastic or a lump of wood and you've ended up with something. That's don't underestimate how complicated and how amazing that is.
You know, it's like I look at some of these guitars here, and I just like, I wonder what would it take, you know, to try and make these from wood. And well, here's the perfect opportunity. So I mean, okay, to build that, you guys have no issues building that, right? To get that finished, paint. Seeing what some of you guys have done, it would probably be 100 pieces of wood inlay, all in different grain directions and all of that.
Fabric tie.
You know, to go ahead and build something like that. Well, building this is no different for me than building a Stratocaster or a Telecaster. But, you know, doing it out of wood, there's a whole different thing going on. I mean, you know, we've got multiple curves, multiple pieces coming. Yet, you know, again, with my method, it's no different.
That looks so 80s rock. I love it. It could be a keytar. Brilliant.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, look who's just arrived as we're about to say goodbye. Sorry, Brad. We've missed you. We've talked about you, but
talked about you a lot, mate, and I promise you they were all nice things.
Great. So listen, we'll say goodbye now. One thing I haven't done is lined up guests for the future yet. Last week, lots of people suggested people who I could contact, and I will be doing that. I won't have time until middle of next week. So next week, I think it would just be like we had before, a nice open chat. If anyone's been on before and wants to come back, just send me a message. If anyone's watching that wants to be on that hasn't been on before, send me a message. It's great to have new voices, new people in. It's all about the community. Thanks again, Ray. Absolutely brilliant to speak to you.
Not a problem. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a blast.
Oh, no, it really has. And it's another one where I've come away with not just loads of new knowledge, but I feel quite inspired. Not to necessarily go and 3D print, but to do other things, because it's been that kind of creative conversation that's got my brain going, which I love.
Well, definitely. You should get involved. Get yourself a 3D printer, and
so it's on my list. It's on my list of many things I want to buy, as long with an extension to the house to fit them all in. Yeah, another shed. Cool. All right. Thanks again. Thanks everyone for watching, and see you soon.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, see you.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi.